All right. Welcome, everybody. I guess it's early afternoon. So good afternoon to everyone. I'm happy to see the people that we have here today. This is the last Zoom presentation of three we've been doing in the last 3 Mondays. And this last one is especially interesting because it is not just one faculty member or one person bringing information to you all, but we have a panel of, I would say, very distinguished faculty members that I'm happy to consider friends. And if you're here, probably that our focus is going to be on conference etiquette. And I think actually it's called on the flyer that went out to everyone, Navigating Conferences with Confidence. And so there's a number of things we're going to talk about today, and hopefully you guys will really learn something and we'll have some interactions and some questions and answers. Before we get started, I'd like to just have each of my panel members here introduce themselves. I'll be moderating. I'm not actually a panel member, but I'll be asking the questions. So on my screen, I have Dr. Orta first, and so I'm gonna let her go first. Just introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Orta Martinez. I'm originally from Mexico, but right now I am a new faculty member at the Robotics Institute in Carnegie Mellon.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Dickens.
Sure. My name is Tarek Dickens. I'm associate professor in the Industrial Manufacturing Engineering Department. Said I've been here for almost 9 years now. So glad that Dr. Moore invited me for this because I think it's a very important topic, actually.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Black.
Yes, hi, I'm Jason Black, associate professor in the School of Business. Background is in computer science. I've taught in both departments currently in the School of Business. I think also this is a very important topic. I was at conferences all month in the month of October, even missed homecoming because I was at a conference, but I think this is a great topic to discuss.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Jones.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly Jones. I serve as Associate Dean in the College of Engineering and Architecture at Howard University. And I've known Dr. Moore for many, many years. So I thank you for inviting me to participate today. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. I'm glad she said that because I think of the people here, we go back the furthest because we were freshmen together at Howard. So that's great. Thank you. Okay, guys, well, thank you. And let's just get the conversation started. I'm just going to throw out some questions. And I think with only 4 of you guys here, we can just start talking and just handle it that way. But our first question is, why would you say conference attendance is important for academics? Because can I just go ahead and just go through my classes, finish, do my prospectus and go on and finish up? Why do I need to go to conferences?
I'll jump in. I think conference, you want us to just jump in or you're going to call?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay. I think conference attendance is important for academics, mainly because it's a great way to network. I'm thinking pre-pandemic, especially. I'm going to a conference. There's nothing like going there, presenting your work. You get an opportunity to basically very quickly tell a lot of people or whoever's in the audience about what you're doing. They tend to come up and talk about it. You hear about what other folks are doing. I always tell my students a good thing to do is kind of, figure out who's in the same session with you, maybe go out of your way to maybe talk to them before or after. You probably have, different research. And I know over the years, I've been at Howard for 25 years. I shouldn't even say the number, it ages me. It's been many years. And I can't tell you how many collaborations I've gotten just from going to conferences and talking to folks, and we follow up. Next thing you know, you're writing a proposal together. So it's just a great way to network.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Not only can you network with people just to find out about people that are doing research in your area, but many of the conferences have professional development tracks. So, if you're a student, you can kind of align yourself with some of these tracks where you can learn about how to do, your dissertation, or how to write better, how to get grant funding, how to prepare yourself as an emerging faculty member once you finish, or if you want to go into research once you finish. all of those things, you know, you can build out of conference attendance. I know when I was working on my PhD, I actually participated in several workshops like that for, you know, up and coming faculty, which really helped me with the tenure process once I got hired at FAMU as a tenure professor, tenure track professor. So that's another advantage you get from conference attendance.
That's great. So that's good, bringing up this idea of the other things going on at the conference besides just the presenting of papers, right? But does that mean, well, have either any of you attended a conference where you weren't presenting?
Yes.
Great.
I probably say often, only because not only am I competitive, but definitely curious. And I think curiosity, I think, is what we all are kind of have the DNA with, right? We're curious about the questions. And I think seeing everybody present those questions and seeing how they present them actually helps you become a better scholar. And so definitely the curiosity there as far as the science aspects of it.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah, I agree with that. The conference that I attended homecoming week was tech entrepreneurship, and I wasn't presenting, but that's something that I'm very serious about right now. And so, you know, I just wanted to go and soak up as much information as I could, as well as Kimberly was saying, as well as network with as many people that are doing that type of thing. So yeah, I'd say probably 50% of the conferences I go to, I'm not presenting, but I'm trying to build collaborations or learn about funding or something like that. So
Great, great.
Then maybe one quick thing, because if you're looking, you know, in your particular research, especially in engineering, you know, there's a lot of conferences where they kind of marry a conference and like a trade show. So you actually get to see some of the state of the art technology that's being out there. And if you're like me, then you're always looking for the next gizmo, you know, to study XYZ. So this is a good time to even pick out something that now you can maybe take back and present to your professor and say, oh, we have to have, you know, this particular cool equipment.
Excellent. Good point. Anybody else? And for the audience, you guys feel free to raise your hand, speak up if you want to interject a question. I don't want to try to hold all the questions to the end because that'll just be a while of waiting. So please jump in if you do have a comment or question. So how would you all respond to the comment, I'd rather save my paper for a journal, right? And so you know that oftentimes as students, there is a push to publish, right, as students and as faculty. And in some disciplines, maybe it's discipline specific, but the journal article may have a higher weight. Have you guys run into that, and how did you handle it?
I do think it depends on the discipline. There are some conferences, engineering conferences like ICRA or IROS, that are starting to have as much weight as journals almost. And also the review process sometimes is a little bit more stringent for conferences because there's so many people that want to publish on those conferences. And so I do say that it's very discipline specific. You also, by publishing results in a conference, you're not forfeiting publishing in a journal as well. You might just build on the work that you publish for the conference and then make a bigger body of work for the journal paper. That's also possible. So I do think it's important to have at least a couple of conference publications and not save everything for a journal.
And maybe just to add a little bit on top of Dr. Marina's comments, I like two firsts. You know, there are conferences out there that are actually pretty stringent in peer review process, and then they are already connected with some type of, you know, publishing entity. So you can get a conference paper and then that gets converted to be published, you know, in a journal article. So that's actually one good way to go.
Okay. When you guys present, you know, at the conference, let's say even as faculty, maybe when you were a grad student, my assumption is, being the excellent researchers that you are, maybe you were presenting something or doing some research that may have even eclipsed someone in your area, and you could get questions that are, how do I say this? because I've seen this happen. They're questions, but they're really not questions. They're kind of trying to stump you, so to speak. Or let's be fair, there could be questions that are just difficult, right? It's an actual real question that somebody has in the audience, but you have no idea. You may even have a difficulty understanding what the question was. So how do you handle those difficult questions at the end of your presentation?
I'll jump in again. I think it's just a good idea to, one, I think the point of going to a conference and presenting is to really further, I consider it an opportunity to really further your research. And I think hard questions, it's a way to have you, assuming it's a legitimate question, that's an interesting, good question, not, one there to trip you up. But those tend to help you think about your research in a slightly different way, to bring up something you may not have ever thought about. But that said, I also have my students do a lot of practice sessions, and we do a practice sessions, not just within our group, but just with varying, people, so that at least you're used to answering questions. I think there's a skill involved in answering a question in a way that, particularly one that you don't know, and you pick up that skill by just having people ask you those tough questions. And so I think it's just to get used to it, just practice it. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a great question. And,
Excellent. That's true. So that really brings up, Dr. Jones, that kind of hits on the idea of finishing the presentation maybe a little before the conference, at least getting it to the point, because I know a lot of times we end up working until the very last minute, right? We're still moving the slides, doing things on the plane. But the quicker you can get done, the more soon you can start to practice in front of people, right? In front of other students, faculty. So yeah, I've seen one student, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, I've seen one student miss a plane because they were still working on the stuff. So that was bad, but yes. Anybody else in terms of difficult questions or just answering questions after your presentation?
Yeah, I was going to concur as far as the prep definitely helps. I mean, that's kind of in anything in life that helps you, with certain hard situations. But I'll steal one from, Dr. Black's department, but, in business, they talk about emotional intelligence. So I think that plays a lot when you're engaging with the audience, because yes, you are going to get, some people were sent with the Terminator assignment, come and get you. So, how do you handle those and kind of engage, and it's always okay to admit that maybe you didn't look at something like Dr. Jones was saying, and that you're going to follow up with it and investigate that because you think that might be, beneficial for your research. So just, keeping a calm head and not getting into that particular trap where, your emotions might carry you away.
Yeah. So Dr. Dickens, you're saying, so you shouldn't feel as though you have to answer the question with the perfect solution, right? If you actually don't know, I need to say you're not sure.
Yeah, and most people in academia are actually inviting, they want to discuss about these things. So it might be that somebody's trying to goat you to give them a call and further, follow up and maybe start some collaborative projects or something. So yeah, I've seen that happen.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was going to agree. I was going to agree with that. Yeah, and there are a lot of times they might be broaching that question to start further discussion. So one thing you can do is just say, hey, well, as Kimberly was saying, I don't, hey, I hadn't thought about that, but I would love to maybe talk to you some more once we finish. And then, that might even change, even if the person might have been coming at you from a confrontational standpoint, it may soften them, right? Because now they go, oh, well, he's actually interested in learning more about this. So their whole demeanor may change. I know I had a situation like that when I was working on my PhD. I went to a conference and, it was a difficult topic and I was trying to go through it. I was new to the topic and I'm sitting in a room with all of these, my research was in mobile computing, right? So I'm sitting in a room with all of these mobile computing experts and I'm giving this presentation. So I tried to stretch it out to make sure I didn't have a lot of questions. So I was talking very slow and trying to, eat up the time. But this one gentleman, kind of stood up and I think he was from Apple. and decided to, hit me with this really, really tough question. And he kind of said it sarcastically almost. But then when I said, hey, you know what, that's a great question. And I hadn't looked at that side, but I would love to talk to you afterwards. And when I did that, his whole demeanor was different when I met him in the hallway. He was extremely engaging, gave me his card, wanted to talk further. And then he ended up being an external committee member when I actually did my dissertation defense. So, those kinds of things do happen. But like they all said already, practicing is important. You may also want to send a copy of it if you have mentors that are not necessarily your professors or at your institution. If you have some other mentors, you might want to send it out to them and have them review it too before you actually present, so you can get some feedback from people whose eyes are not on it every day, right? So they've got a different perspective that they can give you some insight, and they may ask you questions that end up being questions you get from the audience. So that's just another suggestion.
Yeah, I would add that getting tough questions isn't necessarily a bad thing. I remember when I was a grad student, the first question I had was from Howard Stone. He's a famous professor at Princeton. He's asking me something about some of my analytical equations about how flow decays, and he brought that up. And I remember I bring this up in that it was a tough question, but it kind of got me to engage with them, someone that I typically wouldn't engage with, someone at that level. So don't think of these hard questions as something that's a bad thing. Usually it's a good sign.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. I appreciate that. Great, that's right. And this really kind of, everybody's kind of tying into this whole idea of conversation and relationship, right? And the building of relationships, which is one of the main reasons for even going, that first question we talked about. And it could be the start, right? And so if you're presenting at a conference, you are in front of people who are in that field, they're in that session, right? And they're interested, and they very well end up being perhaps part of your committee, as Dr. Black said, right? Or people who you just want to get to know, people who in the future are going to be reviewing the paper that you send in, may even be reviewing a proposal that you send in. So lots of possibilities. Now, in terms of, I think someone mentioned sending information out to be looked at. I think a lot of times, we're most comfortable with our group members, right? Working for the same faculty member, and they've seen your stuff, right? They've seen it a lot of times, and they kind of know it, right? And they can read between the lines of things you aren't actually saying. But I think that was a great point that someone made in terms of sending out your stuff to other people. And where are you going to meet those other people, right? Chances are you're going to meet them at conferences. And so that's another key reason here. Anybody else have anything to add or questions from the audience? Okay. Here's another question I have for you guys. Can you respond to this comment? I'm just a graduate student, and how am I going to speak with faculty from other universities?
I can jump in. I would say one important advice is to do your homework. If you actually want to speak with a faculty from another university, then why do you want to speak with them? Get to know their work. And then when you come and talk to them, I think it's totally okay to approach somebody at a conference. That's why everybody's there. When you come and talk to them, be very polite and ask them actual questions about their work and be interested in it. And that's how you start building relationships.
So I think she hit the nail on the head with that one. So.
Kyle, you're muted. Wait, you're still muted.
I was muted all of a sudden. What? I was muted. I didn't even realize it, but thanks for letting me know. No, I think that was great. I think that we all happen to be in academia, but man, it probably been good to include someone from industry. But a lot of times at these conferences, as academics, this is part of the process, especially as we look towards our job talks or trying to get a faculty position at a university. And I'm hoping, I know we have a lot of grad students in the audience today, I'm hoping that many of you are interested in careers in academia. And so this can be a powerful reason to be speaking with some of those faculty members. I remember there was a faculty member when I was at school at Northwestern who had come to visit one of my professors from Georgia Tech. And he was like, hey, you know, that student that spoke to me, you know, I would love to talk to him before he graduates, you know, and so those kind of things can definitely happen at conferences. And so you start to be more than just a resume, right? And the hundreds of resumes that come from an open position, but you actually now know a person who might be influential at that department that you're interested in. So that is a good point. Do we have any questions? Okay. They tell me I'm supposed to wait 10 seconds after I ask that when I'm teaching, but I don't think this qualifies as teaching. So let me go ahead. Okay, so this gets to the point of the kind of the research elevator pitch. And you guys, many people may be familiar with this whole idea of you want to have a concise explanation of what you're doing. So when you meet people and you talk to them, you can explain to them what's going on with your research, right? And so do you guys have any advice for developing a research elevator pitch?
I think practice, you know, going to some of what we've been talking about before, but going to conferences, just getting used to talking to people about what you're doing. I know, again, it's one of those things you have to practice. I have my students, you know, try to practice explaining their research both to a technical audience and also a non-technical audience. I think the non-technical audience piece is really key here because, you know, that's really to me a test of whether or not you can really, you know, kind of use different kinds of words to explain what it is you're doing. And so I think just practicing that and making sure they can do that. And I think often academics, this is my bias. My husband is in communication, so he always talks about this. Over this last year, he's been listening to a lot of Zooms with me and my colleagues. And so I say all that to say, I think in academia, we tend to talk a long time, as I'm probably doing now, but being concise, and I saw that somewhere on your list, but trying to explain what you're doing in a very concise way is not that easy, but it's a skill I think our students would do well to develop.
Yeah, I've always heard you should do two things. One, try to go explain it to your grandmother. And then two, try to go explain it to either your little child or little niece. And if you can't get both of them, then you probably need to, you know, re-up your strategy a little bit.
Yeah, I like that explanation. I listen to a guy on the radio every morning, and he always talks about putting it where the goats can get it, right? So like the goats, if you know how they eat down to the root, right? So if you can get to the root of it in a way and explain it to where, as Tarek was saying, that your grandfather can get it, or a kid in second or third grade sort of has an idea of what you're talking about, then I think you're on the right track. Not saying that the people you're going to give the pitch to are in second or third grade level, but you know, you want to be able to explain it to them in a way where they can get it really fast. And I mean, there are a lot of workshops and things you can attend to. And especially during COVID, I've noticed that they've had some of those types of workshops have been online that students can participate in, and they're often free. So if you can, you know, try to align yourself with groups that are doing these types of things and just get yourself as much practice as possible. I think by the time you know, really get out there and really start doing it, you'll be pretty comfortable with doing it in 30 seconds.
Good point. Good point.
And can I add one thing?
Go ahead.
I would say a part of it, I feel like, because this was really hard for me too, is letting go of certain aspects of the research. I feel like once you're starting on a problem, then you kind of fall in love with it and you are very proud of how you're doing the research or the specific methods that you're using. And you want to try and convey, oh, this is so cool because I'm using blah, blah, blah. It's like nobody cares. And so trying to distill it down to the actual thing that's important, the actual problem that you're trying to solve. And so I agree with everybody's comments. It's about how do you explain these to a 5-year-old in a way that he understands or she understands how important that is. And it's not about the methods, it's about the problem that you're trying to solve. Even though the methods might be very cool, those you can keep to yourself and to somebody else who's more interested. Yeah.
I think that's a good way. That makes sense to kind of distill it into those two pieces. What is your goal? What's the goal of this research? And how exactly are you going through some of the more scientific things that you're doing to get there to that goal? And really, if you guys think about it, that's kind of the way that we are told that we should teach, right? And I'm not sure all the students would agree that we're doing that all the time, right? But we're supposed to be able to bring out different ideas or explain different topics in class in more than one way, because we got all kinds of learners, right? And so we explain it the way that it's explained, perhaps in the book, and we hit maybe 25–30% of the students, and then we change it up, and then we change it up again. So hopefully, if we are hitting, like you guys said, the older people and then some very young people, if they get it, then maybe we're right in the sweet spot.
That reminds me, there's it's kind of a YouTube, I think, channel that has experts explaining their research in 5 different levels. First, they start off with the elementary school and they go up to expert level. So colleagues. So that might be a good resource to kind of look at. But I'd say always, talk with your advisor, talk to other graduate students, and then work from there.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you,
So
Dr. Ali.
interesting...
I didn't introduce you, but you're kind of our extra panel member. I'm very happy to have you contributing. Could you just tell the people here who you are, sir?
Yes, so I'm Jamal Lee. I'm an assistant professor at FAMU in chemical and biomedical engineering. Got my bachelor's and master's at Howard, my PhD at Drexel University.
That's right. We got 3 Bisons on the line. That's great. Okay. Anybody else?
I was going to say, you do have a chat question that came in.
Okay, here's a question. Thank you, Dr. Dickens, for letting me know. What is the best way to navigate through the difficulties of networking while still being in a pandemic? And most conferences may be virtual hybrid. Good point. We've got a lot of Zoom oriented or similar conferences. What do you guys think in terms of tools to navigate those conferences?
Yeah, I've seen it kind of play out in kind of different realms depending on the conference that you have and what virtual tool they kind of use. But there were some, especially I think it was maybe an SME or ASME or NAMRAC conference, and the tool that they used allowed for some breakout rooms, almost like what you would do in Zoom. But then I think it's better because you can email that person directly because everybody has each other's emails and whatnot. And then you can call each other up on the phone and continue to have side conversations, etc. So for some reason, it's actually worked out a little better for me in that regard because there's that free time of being at home and whatnot and trying to be intentional about maybe your discussions and actually having it one-on-one. Normally you're in a public place, so people are walking by, so sometimes you get distracted. But here it's kind of, you can just be on a one-on-one situation with the person from another university, etc.
I agree with Dr. Dickens. I think that it makes it a little bit better because when you're attending a virtual conference and everybody's in that mindset that you're going to get contacted, you're going to receive different emails and you're going to answer, and it's much easier. I mean, at least for me, I'm very shy about just approaching somebody. But sending somebody an email, it's much easier. Or they usually have like breakout room sessions, or they have kind of weird, like, I don't know how you say, but like these hanging out things with avatars and stuff. It's much easier to send your avatar to like go talk to somebody. Yeah.
You mentioned those avatars. I've seen some of you guys may be familiar with a software called Spatial Chat. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but Spatial Chat I'll put it in the chat in a little bit, but the whole idea is to kind of make these virtual conferences more like regular conferences. And so you move your avatar, which is your face, right? So you're moving it around and you can kind of see if the background, they can change backgrounds, but the background may look like a conference room. And as your avatar approaches the avatar of someone else, you can then see them and hear them. But when you're further away, you cannot. And so it really does help. I think, Dr. Orta, what you're saying is it really is a part of it, because if you're shy, then you may be waiting for a person who you want to talk to not have anybody else around them, right? And you can kind of see that happen. And then you move your avatar over to them, and then you can talk to them and see them and hear them. So yeah, that's a nice venue. And I've seen that a couple of times at workshops recently. Anybody else have anything in terms of just the difference, or you actually, so far, people seem to like the virtual conference a little bit more in terms of for some various reasons.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's definitely more convenient for you, and it's cheaper. You don't have to travel. Even if you're getting paid to do it, you still sometimes have to pay up front and get reimbursed, and that's still a cost, right? So, but one thing that I will mention is that sometimes it can be different, right? I know a lot of times when you do posters, we're kind of used to a certain format of poster sessions where you're pretty much standing next to a board and there's like a room full of people that show up, and they come around. People naturally will gravitate to your poster, right? When you're in a setting like that. In a virtual setting, it doesn't quite work that way, right? Because people kind of know in advance who's presenting posters. And so you might sit in your spot, and you may be there half the afternoon and nobody comes by your spot, because they're not necessarily interested in your topic. So you got to kind of not take it as a personal affront. We tend to go, oh, nobody wants to hear what I'm saying, and you get upset. But it's just that, hey, people might be more invested in another topic that's not your topic, and it doesn't mean you're not doing good work. That's just the nature of virtual poster sessions now. Because I know I had a student that went to one of these poster sessions, and then he emailed me later and was upset because no one came to talk to him. And I said, well, hey, it's just like that sometimes. I've had that happen to me. So, and then he felt a little better. So it's just something to get used to. But I like the variety of tools that are out. Like you said, there's so many different ones that are like this. I saw one that was almost like the video game The Sims, where you kind of walked around a room and they had houses, little rooms that were set up, and you kind of moved into that room and then the scene changed. I mean, they've gone really, elaborate at how these tools are. And I think this might be something that we see even after COVID lifts. We may still have these same types of setups. So it's just, that's the future we're in, I guess.
That's where we are. You're right.
And I think that helps kind of answer. There was a follow-up question to the other question, but one person was talking about when one is unable to interact with other attendees, how can one network adequately in such a situation? I mean, really, again, it just comes down to your interest in somebody. And once you get their email, you can always follow up and say, hey, I noticed you were at, this particular conference or venue, et cetera. I really liked your work in XYZ, can we have a discussion? There's nothing wrong with that, especially in the times that we are in. So just keep, increasing your amount of interactions.
Focus on the number of interactions. I like that. More people, more ideas, you're seeing more things. And in a way, it's easier than reading a ton of papers, right? Especially the fact that some of these conferences that are virtual, I think somebody mentioned they're lower cost a lot of times. And we've seen a number of them that would have been, a traditional registration type fee, whereas they've had instead open sessions just to kind of get people involved in coming to the virtual venue. So it's great. Yeah. In terms of cost for students, we talked about the fact that it's a great idea to go to a conference whether you're presenting or not. and just for the networking opportunities and some of the other things that happen there. So what if your advisor can't pay? What if you have an advisor, you would love to attend a particular conference, you're not presenting, you guys don't have a paper. Has anybody seen those situations where students are able to go on their own?
For me, I think, I think it depends on your commitment and what you want to do. So for me, I guess like, I was a graduate student at Stanford University, and I mean, the stipend that they pay is definitely not enough to live in the Bay Area. And so very early on, I made a decision to take out a loan and to also self-pay for a lot of the things that I wanted to do. Sometimes I self-paid for materials. If I wanted to do other experiments that weren't really related to my PhD, I self-paid for conferences. I mean, and you understand, sometimes advisors just can't pay for everything, and grants come and go. So I say for me it was worth it, but I think it's a very personal decision.
Good point. Good point.
I was going to say
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I would add, I know in computer science, there are a lot of conferences that have especially a lot of the diversity and inclusion focused conferences will have scholarships for students. So, if you can find those and get your name on the list as early as possible, they usually have a certain amount of scholarships they award for students that want to attend. So, I highly recommend you look for that too. And, your advisor can just write you a letter of recommendation. And sometimes that's all it takes.
Good point.
Yeah, I was going to mention this is kind of a point where students can actually be a little bit more resourceful. One, here, especially FAMU and FSU, then technically you have access to both universities. So they always have travel grants every year. They have set aside money that they use, and students can apply for that, with your professor. But also some of these conferences give out travel grants. And so students, if they know a conference is 6 months out, I would already be talking with, whoever is organizing that conference to say, hey, do you have a travel grant for me? Or even maybe go through some of the engineering societies. So there is a way to get it funded. Actually, I've even heard some students, especially a part of the societies, actually go ask a company to sponsor like a group. So there's definitely different ways to get travel money.
Wow.
I would add on to that. So many conferences offer some financial support if you volunteer to be one of the people that helps man some of the tables or do some of the work that the conference needs help with. So I encourage you, usually can reach out to conference chairs and they can kind of fill you in on those kind of opportunities.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, guys. That's some great information. I think let's say that maybe add a little piece of that. Students, even if you have a faculty member, depending on what's going on with them at this point in time, maybe they're going for tenure, maybe they're traveling a lot. Whatever happens to be going on with them does not necessarily have to impact your ability to go to a conference, right? And so I think what you're hearing now from the panel is that, hey, if you see a conference that you think will benefit you, you guys aren't necessarily, your group isn't presenting a paper at that conference, something you may want to look into anyway. Depending on your city, it may be driving distance, which can make things a lot better. Or like has been said here, there may be scholarships so that you could go on somebody else's dime, airfare, hotel, and get some of this networking done and see some of the current technology and research. So that's great. Thank you, guys. What about reviewing papers? So a lot of times at a conference, once you submit, you'll kind of be added into the pool of people who can review. I know you guys have reviewed papers. Do you have anything to add, any techniques or anything that helps you in terms of anything you think about as you review papers?
For me, the first thing I try to do is to kind of get into the mindset of what is the purpose of me reviewing this paper. And it's kind of to make sure that your field has rigor, and but also to make sure that the researchers in your field are also getting better and better. And so I always try to be very kind and to only write comments if they're constructive. Like, it's not about destroying anybody, that sucks. It's about actually writing things that are going to be useful. A lot of the things that happens, for example, is you get a lot of papers that don't have very good writing, or they don't have very good grammar or English techniques, right? It is not okay to just say like your paper sucks. Like, write actually, write comments that are constructive, right? Help them be better, because they're researchers in your field, they're your peers. And so it is also up to you to make them better.
That's great.
Yeah, I would agree. I always try to make sure the comments are constructive and are written in such a way that I know personally, when I have get reviewer comments back, I go through each one to make sure I'm specifically addressing them. So I kind of review papers, assuming that's what the authors will do. So I try to make sure I'm very clear in writing my comments, and I try to avoid kind of general, overly general comments where they're like, wait a minute, what do you, because, obviously reviewers are anonymous, so they can't even come back to you to say, what did you mean? And so, yeah, I just try to be as specific as possible and as constructive as possible.
Yeah, and I would add, just give yourself enough time. I know the very first time I did it, I kind of waited and said, well, I'll review these while I'm on the flight, to the conference, and ended up, realizing that was a huge mistake. And then I was up all night trying to, do a justice to the review. So yeah, just give yourself enough lead time. If you know you're going to review and they're giving you a certain number of papers to read, make sure you carve out that time to do diligence and give them some good constructive feedback.
Any other comments?
I was going to say it also applies for journal reviewers as well, which students, you do get an opportunity if you email your resume to a journal and, ask to be on kind of their list, but it gives you the ability to, again, look at good papers versus bad papers. And then you're also thinking about your own research and where you can place yourself. And that really gave me, as far as, lifelong learning, it gives you that perspective of, okay, I've been doing this 3 years now. Have I gotten any better? So, it's really good to kind of, use it as a mirror to look back at yourself and your own work.
That's right. That's right. And Dr. Dickens, that kind of, lifelong learning, I like that phrase, because sometimes students think, I know when I was a grad student, my advisors were like, I just had them on this huge pedestal. And I'm not saying they didn't deserve to be on the pedestal. It's just that I thought of them as so high that they're basically done. They've learned, like the Beeger, right? They've learned all that is learnable, like kind of thing. And to hear you say lifelong learning really tells the students that, hey, look, I'm still doing this. I'm still learning. I'm still improving. I'm reading to get better. So you got to be doing the same. So thanks for that. That's great.
Yeah, you can never sharpen the sword enough, right? It's lifelong. And I saw another chat question where somebody was asking about what if you have conflicting reviewers from two people?
That's right. That's a question.
Somebody told me this a long ago when I got my first paper that just, totally decimated my heart, my life. Never try to argue with the reviewer, whether they are conflicting or not, unless it's something blatant where somebody maybe has some bias, but you can probably never prove that. Like Dr. Black was saying, you have to take a little time away from it, digest it a little bit, and then really, everything is about communication. So what is this person really trying to say about my work? Even if they are, a little derogatory, maybe in their comments, there's still some essence there that you can use to, take as fodder to kind of improve. So never take it personally, as people have told me.
I definitely agree. I like this idea of kind of bringing out what we do. When Dr. Jones was mentioning, we go line by line, right? Through every comment, trying to see what was that person trying to say. And I think that's also a great way to go about forming our reviews in the same way, knowing that, like Dr. Orta said, that somebody's going to be looking at it and trying to make their stuff better. But Dr. Dickens, I think that when you get those things that may be conflicting, it may seem conflicting on the surface, right? But if someone has a question, well, I'll put it like this. In a recent review that we got back, our response initially was, well, wait a minute, we said that, we did say that, we did answer that. Well, apparently the person reviewing it didn't think it was very clear, right? So even though we think we hit on exactly what the person was asking for, we must have hit on it in a way that wasn't so clear to the reader. And so we went back, we didn't just ignore it and say, well, it's in there anyway. We went back and tried to make that point more clear. So that's good advice.
Yeah, and some of my mistakes, just to be very open, you know, there was a paper, and actually the reviewer probably was the one, you know, who gave me the paper, and his paper was talking about something similar, and I should have found his paper and included his work, you know. But there is some discussion around that as well. But if there is something recent, as far as recent work, state of the art, then of course that's why we are publishing, you know, to continue the basis of knowledge. So we should, you know, have that into account.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this is where, you know, again, your mentor can be helpful, right? So, you know, it could be that, like you were saying, Carl, that, you know, it's just something that you thought you might have been explaining and you didn't, or you didn't explain it well enough. And maybe if you run that by your advisor or whoever your mentors are, they can see that and kind of put it in perspective for you. Because we're only human, right? So, you know, you get your feelings hurt when you know, in this business, there's no question about it. You know, you write these, you know, spend all this time writing this paper or writing this grant proposal, and then, you know, you get it back and there's red ink all over it. You know, you feel like, hey, well, you know, is this saying something about me as a person? You know, but and so sometimes your mentors can kind of sit you down and say, yeah, well, right here, you know, you could have explained how you're going to evaluate this a little bit better, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I highly lean on mentors as much as I can, you know, even, and, you know, as we all know about mentoring, doesn't have to be someone older than you. Sometimes your mentors are younger than you know, but they may have some experience in some area that you need to learn from. So yeah, I'd say just, you know, don't take it personal. Like Dr. Dennis was saying, don't take it personal. I mean, Dickens, just don't take it personal, and then just try to get as much other feedback as you can to get some clarity.
Right, right. Hey guys, what about physical? I have a question kind of related to physical models, or, you know, some of us doing work more theoretical, but if you are the kind of person that maybe has something that you can show, you know, whether it be a couple of slides, you know, you're at a conference, you are not presenting, but you have like a few slides in a folder, or you've manufactured, 3D printed something that's related to your research. Any of you ever walked around or seen people with an item at a conference? What do you all think about that?
I mean, I'm an environmental engineer. We have, at our conferences, I've not really seen that, but that may be different for other disciplines.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, haptics and people, there are like demonstration sessions, because all the, you can't feel haptics, it kind of makes no sense. It's kind of, I would say it might be a little awkward. I don't know. How you approach somebody and be like, hey, look at my thing.
Yeah.
But I would say maybe first approaching, maybe it's okay to leave it in your room, and then if they're interested, you can bring it down to them or something, but maybe don't walk around with your thing.
I understand that. That makes sense to me. It's almost like, you know, it's cold out. Like I tell my kids, they don't want to wear it. It's horrible. I can't get my kids to put on a coat for anything. but it's like, at least bring it and have it in the car in case you need to bring it down. That's like the same type of thing. And really one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you guys about that is that when I was in school, also studying haptics, Dr. Orta, so my advisor was, we were using a wheel in the presentation to explain things. And he was like, you know, this would really be very easily explained if you brought a rollerblade wheel with you to the presentation. And I was like, what? And so I brought it, and I, you know, at that point, I kind of rolled it on the screen. I did whatever it was. And I mean, it did help. So I guess it gets to the point of, you know, I think Dr. Black mentioned a number of times, you know, talk to your advisor, talk to your mentor. You know, maybe something that would not obviously appear normal may be useful and helpful in this circumstance. So there you go.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it depends on the situation. I mean, because I've been at conferences like you mentioned about, you know, haptics, and you're talking about things that might be like 3D or holographic. You know, you're giving a presentation, you kind of have to have, you know, I mean, it's easier if you can maybe, hey, I got this holographic keyboard and it's on a table in front of your poster where you could show it. But then at this flip side of that, like you said, you know, you don't want to bring that and then you set it up and then it's not working right. And then people are, this is like half of your presentation and the thing isn't working. Then you mentioned awkward, Dr. Orta. Yeah, that can be extremely awkward, right? And throw your whole presentation off. And then the other thing you might want to be careful about, I know at least in IT, you might end up having people focus on the gadget. So while you're talking on your presentation, they're playing with the gadget. They're not even really listening to what you're saying on your poster. So yeah, I think, you know, Carl, what you were saying, you know, maybe saying, hey, I got this thing, but it's, you know, here's some slides that show what it looks like. And if you'd like to see it, you know, I can meet you afterwards if we talk and I can show it to you. You know, that might be a better approach than just carrying it around, you know, at the presentation.
Right. Good point.
I think it might be okay. So if it's something very small that, you know, you can bring up to just explain a concept. So for example, when I was on my, you know, on the job market and I was doing faculty interviews, I still carried around as a small little toy that I kind of used to explain some of my nano robots. And that kind of helped me connect with some people that, you know, were completely outside of my field. So I think if it's something small that you can like quickly take out and it's not like that much of a burden, it might be worthwhile.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ali. Appreciate that.
I was going to say maybe one more scenario I guess might work out as kind of like a science demonstration at the end, where maybe you solicit people, if you're the last one, to either come up and talk to you afterwards, or if you're doing a poster session or something like that. For me, it might be a little confusing to have somebody pass around something, and it might make me a little perturbed if I was at the end of the line and it never got to me. So, but different scenarios.
Different scenarios. Let me see. I think we lost Dr. Jones. He had to jump off, but we appreciate her being here. And let me see. Is it okay? I think we did not. I think we have one question in the chat. Is it okay? And if it is, what point should one rebut a review to a paper? Answers to that question?
Does that mean rebuttal?
Yeah, like a rebuttal, like I don't agree with the point the person was trying to make, therefore, and here's my rebuttal.
There's no way to win that argument. It's going to be up to the editor or whoever, but yeah, just synthesize what they're trying to say and then either resubmit or go find another opportunity to, you know, put that item in.
Okay. All right, and I think that's all for the questions. I just want to say thank you to our panel. I know everybody is very busy, and I took away some of your lunchtime, if not all of it. So thank you very much for participating. Students, I hope you guys got something from this. And if you would like to interact or email any additional questions, please do so. Send me an email and I'll make sure it gets to the panel members for you. Okay. Okay, well, thank you guys very much, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. So I'm headed to your office for lunch.
That's right. I'm coming to your house, Carl. You're around the corner from me. I'm coming by there.
Come on. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
All right, take
All
care.
right,
y'all.
bye-bye.
Bye.